Hello, Gen Mex. How are you doing? So excited to have a live chat with you guys tonight, a little happy hour presentation and a little community building. So I'm very excited about this. We are going to be talking about the economy, and things have been a little bit crazy in the world of the economy of the US, of Canada, of Mexico, of the entire world. So I have brought in a economist. So I've actually got two guests with me today, and I'm going to introduce them and then have them talk a little bit about why I chose them specifically. I guess what is it that they can bring to the table? But they both work for Actinver, which is the bank that I bank with. And I just noticed I've got the Actinver, I got my folder from when I opened my accounts back here. So I've got all my paperwork with me. Um, and but they are both with Actinver. And first, let's have Bernardo introduce himself. He is the director of expat services. So Bernardo is here just in case you have any questions specifically about banking, whereas Enrique is really, he's the chief economist with Actinver. And so he's going to be able to just discuss things like the peso and, really how the trade war is affecting how things work in Mexico, especially for expats specifically. So Bernardo, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Let folks know what you're doing here.
Hi guys, I'm Bernardo. I've been here before. I run a few offices in Actinver, in between Vallarta, Ajijic, San Miguel de Allende, Cabo, Mazatlan. So I practically run all the expat service banking in Mexico. I mean, I have worked with expats since many years in real estate, mortgages, and now investment banking. I have been an investment banker for about 15 years. I was an advisor for 9 or 10 years in Mazatlan, and then I moved to Cabo to be a manager. And now I help a lot of expats banking in Mexico and also advisors advising expats in Mexico. But today, Enrique is the rock star, and I would be glad to share his information. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bernardo, and thank you for bringing Enrique to the channel today. So, Enrique, let's hear. I mentioned you're the chief economist, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, that's always a very good question. And so I work for Actinver. We are an investment bank in Mexico. We have different businesses in our company. Of course, we have a wealth management team that is a very large one. It's a very important one for us. But it's not only that. We also have asset management. We have global markets and treasury. We have investment banking. And as a financial services firm, we have a research team, a team that I lead, where we are responsible for monitoring the economy of Mexico and the economy of the US and some other economies around the world, but also the securities, the assets that are available in each of these countries. So we take a look at fixed income markets, equity markets, commodities, of course, currencies. And I supervise this team, but within the team, I also act as the chief economist. So that means that I'm responsible for the output, the economic output that comes out of the team. And it's also an input that is used by the different divisions in order to make decisions of where to invest, what we should be doing with our business, where we should be growing, which countries we should be taking a look at.
Okay, thank you so much for that quick introduction. And now I see we've already got 40 folks online, so I want to make sure I get you guys into the chat, and I want to hear where these guys are, because none of us is at our official home in Mexico, I guess, maybe, or maybe our second home in Mexico for Enrique. But I am up here in Portland, Oregon. I've got my Wish I Was There t-shirt. You can get one of these online. I'm sure there'll be a link down below or something like that if you're watching the replay, but I've got Wish I Was There t-shirts. Bernardo, maybe you can share where you are and show us that view, because you showed us the view in the beginning here. So show us where you are and what are you doing there?
Yeah, well, I'm in Mazatlan, my hometown. I'm originally from Mazatlan, so I'm visiting the team to help them out and to assist them in a few programs. This is the great view. They have this for the pigeons here, but there's the islands over there, Beautiful view.
Beautiful.
The sunset's coming down, so I'm taking the conference from here.
Yes, very good. And your official home is Cabo, correct?
Yeah, I live in Cabo since 2020, but I'm originally from Mazatlan.
Okay, perfect. And Enrique, can I put you on the spot at this point, and to show us where and tell us where you are and kind of turn around and show us that view real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the same. It's not as exciting as Bernardo's, but I officially live in the city of Puebla. but I come to Mexico City quite a few times a week, and I have here a small apartment with a very nice view. Actually, it's the 40th floor here in Mexico City. You can see the Revolution Monument somewhere
Wow.
down there. It's a very good spot, very central on the main street of Mexico City. Uh, my place here is tiny, but it's really all that I need whenever I'm here in the city.
And it looks a little bit overcast there in Mexico City right now.
Yes, I think there's going to be a lot of rain coming this evening.
Well, hopefully that rain will not impact this webinar. So maybe we should dive in. And actually, as we're diving in here, and Enrique starts to present and give us information, we're going to have chance for question and answer in kind of the second half of this presentation today. So I want to first get you guys onto those keyboards and hear where you are coming in from. So tell me that in the comments section. And then we'll do kind of a little roll call of who all is showing up here. But first, we're going to have Enrique. If you're ready, Enrique, just kind of tell us a little bit of it, kind of give us an overview of what expats should be thinking about right now. People who are looking to move to Mexico or who are already living in Mexico, typically people who have income from other countries. That's probably the biggest difference between like clients that are foreigners, and Actinver is a huge bank for Mexicans, and the foreign population that's working with Actinver is probably a smaller portion, but we have slightly different needs, a lot of overlap. So yeah, and folks are already hopping in, yeah. So Enrique, I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if Brighton, you're okay. Maybe I can start giving an overview of where Mexico stands at the moment.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Everyone that is connected, there can be all kinds of knowledge about what Mexico does, where Mexico is at the moment. But I can tell you that Mexico is a very large economy, and that's something important to always consider. It's not only large in the sense that it has a large population, it also is one of the largest economies in the world. And geographically, it's also a challenging country. It's full of mountains. It has all kinds of ecosystems. It has all kinds of ethnicities, languages. So it's a very diversified country, a diversified economy with a very diversified social platform to begin studying this country. But if I have to narrow down Mexico into just a few important highlights of what this country is about, I can tell that maybe there's three Mexicos in one. There is a Mexico that is very focused on international trade, producing, in particular, manufacturing goods. And it is a country that has decided by design, but also because of its geographical location, to be very tightly integrated with the US. And that's a very important Mexico. It's a Mexico that represents perhaps about 2/3 of the economy in general. But there's another two Mexicos at the same time. There is one Mexico that, for historical reasons, has focused on oil. And there's a lot of people that think about Mexico the way the economy was maybe 40, 50, 60 years ago, where this part of the country depended a lot on oil prices, on oil extraction, and on oil exports. But oil is something that has been decreasing in its amount in Mexico, and that's an economy that is struggling. Most of the states that depend on oil are located along the Gulf of Mexico, or whatever it's called nowadays, and that's an important part of Mexico, but it's something not to be considering when thinking about the economy of this place. And there's a third Mexico. There's a Mexico in particular in the south that historically has been a place that has been underdeveloped. It's very difficult to create infrastructure in that part of the country. I'm talking about the states of Chiapas, Oaxaca, places both in the south and the southeast of Mexico, where a lot of these people depend on government transfers, social help of some sort of or other going to that part of the country, but also migration from this part of Mexico, mostly to the United States. So always when thinking about Mexico, it's important to think about these different velocities at which Mexico is growing, how different things might be. Most Americans living in Mexico live along the northern border of Mexico, that is the southern border of the United States. There's a couple of spots where there's a lot of immigrants into Mexico. One of them is Baja California Sur, where both Brighton and Bernardo tend to be a lot of the year. It's a very touristic place. It's a very, very nice place. Another part is more in the center of the country, both in the states of Jalisco and the state of Guanajuato, where you can find cities like San Miguel Allende or the Lake of Chapala and the different towns around this lake. So, and there's a lot of expats also located in this part of the world. So with that context, let me breathe a little bit and try to remember what has been happening over the last 5 years. And we came out of a pandemic. It was a very difficult pandemic all over the world, but it was also a pandemic that created an environment where countries around the world realized that perhaps the effort of globalization that we saw during the 90s was an effort that perhaps was more or less reaching an end. We have been seeing trade wars appearing since the end of the pandemic, and even accelerated trade wars, in particular with the United States and China. But it's, I think, a reflection of manufacturing chains around the world, thinking that it might be too difficult to be too globalized at this point. So Mexico's buzzword since 2020, 2021 was a buzzword called nearshoring. This idea that companies, in particular American companies, were thinking about new investments being done only in the United States, and that investment, when going to the United States, was going to create a natural need for companies to start getting more help in the northeastern part of Mexico, in the northern part of Mexico, in particular those regions that are next to the border with Texas, and that Mexico was going to be seeing a large investment, not only investment of these American companies that I'm talking about, but also investment of different companies around the world that were trying to get access to the United States, and by investing in Mexico, they could be seeing that. This nearshoring trend was very active in Mexico for the last years. It didn't quite materialize entirely in important dynamics, important growth, and important employment in Mexico. I mean, there were some signs that this was at least going in the right direction, but a very important structural change happened by the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and that is that the United States had elections. These elections suggested that people were agreeing more with the economic platform that the Republican Party was communicating. Trump actually became president of the United States, and Mexico, again, like it was in 2015 and 2016, Mexico became again a very important part of American politics. Mexico is in the hotspot. We're being mentioned whenever it comes to topics related to border security, drugs, immigration, but also economic aspects. So economic aspects have to do with remittances, with investment, with production, the role that Mexico is having in allowing certain Chinese goods reaching our economy and then being exported to the U.S. And there's also all sort of things happening in Mexico at the moment. The general expectation that we have as economists, I mean, the general group of economists and investors and companies in Mexico, is that this is a volatility that we might need to accept for a few months, but that the outcome or the end result of these trade wars is one where Mexico is going to be in a very good stand, working with the United States and becoming even a better partner that we have always been. So, yeah.
Actually, I'm going to give you a break to take a breath. So that was wonderful. I love that explanation. I feel like I know more about Mexican economics than I knew for the last 5 years of living there. It's interesting as a foreigner. I don't know a lot. You mentioned the election of Trump. Of course, we had an election in Mexico too. So I want to make sure we touch on how that changed from administration to administration. But I do want to get to the audience real quick and just recognize who's on here, who is amongst us. So we've got George from Las Cruces, New Mexico. We've got Una Gringa in Mexico from Oaxaca. Amy's from Portland, Oregon. And we've got Ontario, we've got St. Charles, Missouri, we've got Brenda from Wisconsin wanting to move back to Mexico soon. Here's to making that go quickly. Karen from Dallas, Norma from, she's in Tijuana now, commuting back and forth from the Inland Empire in California. Great. Mike and Noel just arrived in La Paz. They have a condo in Centro and go back and forth from, I believe it's Seattle. And we've got Mazatlan. We've got sitting in a dentist office in La Paz. So here for 12 days to start working on our Extreme Fixer Upper. I'm going to have a video about an Extreme Fixer Upper coming up soon, hopefully. That's a little preview. We've got someone from Arizona and Puerto Escondido. So thank you all for kind of checking in there. The next question I'm going to have for everyone is, because I officially build this as a happy hour, I do want to hear what you all might be drinking, and it does not need to be alcoholic. It doesn't need to be anything. But just in case you are, that's going to be the next question before we really dig into economic questions. So hold off on those just yet, or they might get lost. I, by the way, am drinking a red wine, and I normally would be here with a sangria, but I've been watching my sugar lately, and I actually have one of those patches. I don't know if anyone's ever seen one of these. It's this little patch that keeps track of your blood sugar. You can get it on Amazon for like $50, and it tells you what your blood sugar is. So, and knowing that sangria is like 50% sugar, I decided to skip the Sprite and just go completely with just red wine. This red wine, of course, is coming from Oregon. Although I usually, when I'm in Mexico, I drink red wines from the Guadalupe Valley in Baja California. But here it's a lot easier to get an Oregon wine. So Bernardo, why don't I ask you what you're drinking? You look like you're in a bar or restaurant right now. So what have they served up?
I'm in the restaurant of the hotel in Mazatlan. I'm having a Cuba, which is a rum with Coke and some mineral water. Cheers to everyone.
Okay, wonderful. And Enrique, do you have a drink with you right now?
I do have a drink with me, and I'm drinking what may or may not be plain water.
Is that from the tap in Mexico City, or is that nice bottled water?
It's nice bottled water. Yes, it's definitely not from the tap.
Very good, very good. So, someone, Mike, says wine has lots of sugar. So I'm gonna be able to tell you guys where my sugar is right by the end of this to see what the wine has done. That was also part of why I wanted to drink a glass of wine. Is these little sensors last for 15 days, so you've got this little chart of where your sugar is. So we'll see by the end if I'm on a sugar rush or not. But yeah, if everyone out in the audience, if you're being happy with a drink and participating in the happy hour, please let us know in the comments, and we're going to pass it back to Enrique to continue his presentation. And Michael, I will let you know, right now we're at 88 milligrams per liter, I guess, of sugar. Oh, Michael's drinking chai. Come on, that's got a lot of sugar in it. Well, if it's a nice sweet chai. So sometimes chai doesn't need to be that sweet. But Enrique, we're going to go back to you. Michael, no sugar added. Well, here is Enrique with no sugar added, just plain old water. Enrique, tell us some more about the economy before we get into questions.
So let's go back to where Mexico is right now, and I know that I'm emphasizing too much the role of public policies in the United States, but it really matters. I mean, the United States is a very big country that is an important driver for economies all over the world, but in particular, Mexico being next to the U.S., it is, of course, one of the most important drivers. And the new administration in the U.S. is one that is changing things, right? This is sending a signal that is trying to change things. And that is creating a new environment, an environment that right now might be signaling uncertainty, but also it's sending signals that the main goal of this administration, of this U.S. administration, is not really Mexico. It's about how to compete with China, how to be ready for the next 50 years. China is a very big country as well that has made massive strides in technology, in telecommunications, in artificial intelligence, in biotechnology, in many things that matter for Europe and matter for the U.S. and of course now matter for Mexico. So whenever we try to understand Mexico from its outside forces, I'll also talk about its inside forces that are as important. But whenever you want to try to think about outside forces, we need to more or less try to guess what Trump and the administration is trying to achieve and the role that Mexico might be having in that. And the opinion that we have here in Mexico is that the U.S. is trying to secure its borders. I think that's something that is, I mean, one way or another expected from every country in the world. And Mexico has a big role to play in that, and I insist that it has to do with immigration, with security in general, with fentanyl, with different topics that matter to the United States. And one of the main negotiation tactics that are common at this time is the use of import tariffs. I'm not sure if everybody has heard what an import tariff is, but just in case you haven't, whenever a country, in this case, the United States, receives imports from another place, a government might impose some tax, some extra tax on a particular product coming from a particular country, and that extra tax that the importer pays is what is called an import tariff. And the main negotiation tactic that is being used now by the US administration is imposing import tariffs, or at least threatening to put import tariffs to products from different parts of the world, and with that, negotiate more aggressively with governments from different places around the world. Right now, Mexico has tariffs. I mean, Mexican, let me be more precise. Mexican exports that go to the US, a US importer has to pay a tariff on those Mexican imports. And if you think about the Mexican exports, you can divide them into three categories. Every single export that Mexico sends to the US related to aluminum or steel has a 25% tariff. That's in order to protect those sectors in the United States.
Enrique, real quick,
yeah.
Is that a new tariff, or are these existing tariffs that have been in place for a long time?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, that is a new tariff. Okay. For practical purposes, before we had this change in the administration in the US, if you took a look at all the import tariffs of Mexican products coming into the US, on average, that tax was of about 1.5%. And these new tariffs that just came in increased that tax from 1.5% to 15%. The expectation is that they will go down, considerably down, with the negotiations, perhaps to levels of about 4.5% or something of that sort. But these ones that I'm going to mention are almost exclusively new. So steel and aluminum have tariffs. Thank you for the clarification. The second category is related to the automobile sector. You know that the U.S. and Mexico produce a lot of cars together, and it's not only cars; it's trucks, it's machinery, it's electronic equipment. But whenever it comes to automotives, whenever a car is produced in North America, there are different studies, but more or less they signal that every single pieces that could form a car that is produced in North America, think of a screw or individual piece, they can cross the border between the U.S. and Mexico anything between 7 and 15 times, because some products are done in the U.S. and they're sent back to Mexico. They cross back and forth. All the value that is generated in the U.S. can go back and forth along the border nowadays without any kind of tariff. But those things that are produced in Mexico, only the value that is produced in Mexico, whenever it's sent to the U.S., that tariff went up to 25%. Again, only the things that are not produced in the U.S. on the first hand. And then the third category of products is everything else. And if you want to figure out if your avocado and your guacamole in the U.S. has to pay a tariff, you need to go and check every single item, every single type of avocado from every single place around the world, and you need to check the new rules, if they have to pay a tariff or not. If they do, they have to pay a tax of 25%. If they're included as part of the free trade agreement that Mexico has with the U.S., they don't have to pay any tariff at all. But if you do all the sum, as I was mentioning, last year the total, on average, tariffs that Mexican products had in the U.S. was of about 1.5%. They went up to 15%, but slowly there have been some announcement that as the Mexican economy and the Mexican government is working with the U.S. government, these tariffs are now going back to returning to normal numbers. They were up to 15%, but we are expecting them to go at least to around 7% in the next weeks. But I think it's very likely that these numbers are going to go to about 4.5%. So it's a little bit more tax than it used to be, but it's not something that is going to change at all the Mexican economy with this information. Of course, now I'm only talking about the bilateral relationship in terms of trade and in terms of joint production that I'm talking between Mexico and the U.S. But there's many more things that need to be discussed in the following months. Things that are related to immigration. That's a very important topic in the U.S. Of course, there's both skilled and non-skilled workers in Mexico that immigrate to the U.S. and then both they do it in a formal way or in a legal way, and some of them don't do it in a legal or even formal way. But that also has its own interesting dynamics. And so far, I think those negotiations and those talks are simply not present yet. But it's something that should be happening anytime soon. And the third topic that is involved in these negotiations is a topic that is related to border security in terms of everything, in terms of drugs and violence and guns and money and all kinds of things. Those are topics that almost by the definition of what they mean are discussions that are not open to the public. I mean, we sometimes get some highlights in a few media, but the general perception is that these things are going to be negotiated. There has to be a strengthening of the rule of law in certain parts of Mexico that perhaps have been weak or are weaker than they should be. But those are topics that are definitely being discussed, even if we don't know the details. So with these negotiations, let me tell you what is happening in Mexico at the moment. First things first, global companies that are located in Mexico, most of the profits that they make, they are reinvesting them in Mexico. Mexico receives usually an average about $30 to $35 billion of foreign direct investment every year. It's a lot of money. Those are really, really important amounts of global companies that are investing in Mexico. These companies are not just American companies. It's the largest source of investment in Mexico for sure, but it's definitely not the majority. I mean, we receive investment from companies that come from Europe, that come from South America, that come from Asia. We receive investment from all over the world. And all those companies, whether they are American or not American, those operations that they do have in Mexico, it is very important to measure that. To mention that they are reinvesting their profits in Mexico. We haven't been seeing these companies just taking their profits and moving back to wherever they came from, to Europe or Asia or North America. We're just seeing that money staying here. And there have also been announcements by very large companies around the world in recent weeks saying that they are expecting these negotiations to run smoothly and that a good outcome is going to be achievable. And very large companies like Netflix or Walmart or I don't know, or Unilever, I mean, all kinds of sectors, all kinds of origin of these funds that are expected to be getting back into Mexico in the next months. So foreign direct investment in Mexico, there might not be too much new investment, but the investment that is here is generating profits and is being reinvested in the growth of this country. The other type of investment that is related to locals, and that's the vast majority of investment, Mexican companies investing in Mexico, those are companies that it depends a lot on the sector that you're focusing on. There are some sectors, those that are in the middle of the negotiations with the U.S., things that are related to cars or manufacturing or electronic and electrical equipment. Perhaps the investment in those sectors are relatively low at this time of the year. I think it's natural to expect that. But things that are related to consumption of the general population, whether it's food and beverage or healthcare, I mean, everything that people buy anyways on every single day, those are companies that are located in sectors where investment is happening within the private sector. Government expenditures in Mexico, they have been relatively low. I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Those investments we saw in previous years were related to very specific projects, and in particular projects in the south of Mexico, not really designed to promote long-term growth. They were more designed to promote helping local populations that didn't have access to infrastructure or foreign direct investment. So you have to think about those expenditures more related to social assistance than infrastructure. But investment in Mexico as a whole, I mean, when we add all of these things together, investment in Mexico is not at its very best moment, but it's relatively stable. And it's particularly surprising good for the amount of uncertainty in the bilateral relationships with the United States.
Okay. Okay, that was big. So I'm going to give you another break, and I'm also going to give people a chance to start putting their own questions in here. And these can be questions about banking, specifically in Mexico, that Bernardo might be able to answer, or more that are more economic questions. I know I've got some questions here, but I do want to quickly look through. It looks like we've got a good group of healthy folks here today. Amy over at Destination Retirement, if you're not familiar with her channel, go check it out. I think actually I released a video with her today. We were in a Mexican tienda up here in Portland just yesterday. So check her channel out. Also, we've got, well, actually, I don't know if I can consider a Mountain Dew a healthy beverage. I think that one's going to spike some sugar there, Sandra. Someone from Reno, Nevada, coming down to El Centenario on June 7th. So that's my hometown when I'm in Mexico. We've got a number of people who are non-drinkers here, and that is totally welcome. I actually want to do a video about being sober in Mexico. I've got one about a sober bar up in Guadalajara, which only serves non-alcoholic drinks. And so that was pretty cool, but I really want to cover expats because there's definitely a drinking culture. There's definitely some pressure. So I do want to address that in a future video. So let's see here, hibiscus drink. And someone actually, so seems like Mexico has been more dangerous lately. So I'm not sure that's something that, I know we had a little bit of a flare up in La Paz and Cabo, but it seems like that one seems to have calmed down. I haven't really been paying as much attention. So Bernardo, maybe just from a personal standpoint, you could give some thoughts there. Is Cabo pretty calm these days? I know it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was leaving. There was
Yes, there were some disturbs. Like they fired up, I think, 2 buses with no people inside. After that, huge military operative came in. They grabbed someone, they got him out, and that's kind of how it has been. I think Cabo is it's a very small place, and we don't have sierra nor jungle to run away like other places in Mexico, so it's not so easy to hide. So it's a little bit different from Sinaloa or Michoacan or other places where you have other places to hide. No? But that time they act very fast and they fix and they cut someone, and till now we haven't heard anything else.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because I saw the presence in La Paz before I left, which, I mean, military presence in Mexico is pretty normal day to day. It just kind of surges at certain points of time. Let's see here. Someone else is drinking Coke Zero. So yeah, we've got a pretty healthy crowd with us today. Enrique, I want to put this back to you and see if you have, and actually I want to make sure folks are putting their questions in specifically so we answer those specific questions, whatever reason you're here. If you've got something specific, put those in the comments now. I do have some questions, Enrique, but I'm not sure if you want to continue presenting or take on a couple of questions.
Well, maybe I could just mention one last thing before we go on to questions. Because a lot of foreigners, when they think about Mexico, one of the first things that they want to find out is what is our expectation for the exchange rate for the Mexican peso. But so let me tell you first what Mexicans are doing in terms of financial markets, in terms of their investments, and maybe between Bernardo and I, we can also try to answer what we think is a good timing to bring dollars into Mexico and change them into Mexican pesos. So first things first, the interest rate in Mexico, the rate that, like in the U.S., is set by the Federal Reserve, by its central bank. It's a number, it's a rate that determines all rates, whether it's savings or loans or mortgages. Everything has to do with either saving or asking for money is determined by this individual rate. This rate, to put it in context, in the U.S., when inflation started to kick in the economy in the last couple of years, the central bank in the U.S. had to increase its rate to around 5.50, if I remember correctly, and then it started to go down now to levels of 4.5%. 5.50 it's a big number in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. was used to seeing rates at 0% or very low rates for a very long time, and the last time that we saw rates at this level was many decades ago. I mean, it looks like a very large number. And normally, what happens when rates are high? 2 things happen at the same time. People find very attractive to save in high rates because without much risk, you can get a good return. But also when rates are high and they are translating into more expensive loans, also people and companies start asking for less money, asking for less loans. And the net effect of that is that both people and companies save more money. They also lend less, they ask for less loans, and they therefore invest less. And that more or less makes the economy go slower. That same idea of how interest rates work in the U.S., they also work in Mexico. They work in most countries around the world. Here in Mexico, the rate went all the way up to 11.25%, 11.25%. That's very high. That's very high for an emerging country. That is very high for a country that has the same level of risk of Mexico. And by most standards, perhaps it was too aggressive by the Central Bank of Mexico to take the rate all the way to those levels. What was the natural behavior of people in Mexico with those rates? Everybody wanted to save their money. People would just go to their favorite bank. I mean, of course, I'm biased and I prefer Actinver, but people would just go to their bank and ask to open a savings account and ask for any kind of fixed income investment because everybody wanted to make use of these very high rates.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick because this is why Bernardo's been on the show before, and I'm one of those people, and now my wife is too. Is that saving in Mexico became much more lucrative, I guess, to save in pesos than to save in dollars. So,
very lucrative, and it was not only Mexicans, as you're mentioning. Everybody and their grandmother wanted to bring their money to Mexico. Everybody, foreign investors, institutional investors. Millions, billions of dollars came into Mexico trying to make use of these rates. The effect of that is that if you want to invest in Mexico, you need to change your foreign currency, your dollars, your euros, your pounds, whatever currency you have, into Mexican pesos and then invest them. And that made an effect that the Mexican peso, in spite of all the things that I was mentioning, and in spite of the possible risk and uncertainty, and even if people were nervous, the Mexican peso has been appreciating considerably over the last years. To give you like some idea of the numbers, at the worst time of the pandemic, the exchange rate was 25 pesos to the dollar, and then it went all the way down to 16.5 pesos to the dollar by the middle of last year. And nowadays, it has become a lot more stable of levels of around 19%. So it's maybe 20% above the minima that we saw at the middle of last year, but also considerably more appreciated that currency that we saw during the pandemic and in previous years. So the Mexican currency now is very stable. There was some worry that perhaps as the central bank was going to be decreasing rates. Those rates are not now at 11.25%. They're now at 8.5%. The expectation is that rate could even go down to 7.75%. But because Mexico is a very safe country for an emerging economy, whether you consider that for the risk of default, or you take a look about the expectations of future inflation, I mean, by most measures that you can think of, Mexico still has a very high rate. And that has made that the central bank in this country can cut rates, and they have been cutting them very aggressively, as I was mentioning. And in spite of that, the currency remains incredibly stable. So what Mexicans are doing nowadays is that they're buying fixed income, short-term rates, as I am mentioning. They have been buying some US dollars, but not a lot. We're not seeing an environment where everybody's just buying dollars, preparing for a depreciation of the currency. Most investors in Mexico have some degree of US dollars just as a protection. It makes natural sense to have some dollars and perhaps a little bit of euros. A natural signal of where we could imagine the exchange rate going is to take a look at whether Mexicans are just buying large amounts of dollars, and that's definitely not the case. And most investors in Mexico, even those that have a high tolerance for risk, they in other countries would just be investing in stocks, in individual stocks, in technology. Because of the dynamics of the currency, investors are not really taking risks. They're not really using a lot of stock markets in general and focusing on safer risks because of returns that they are offering. I'm not sure, Bernardo, if more or less you agree with this point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, back in the days, you had to be brilliant to get a good exchange rate. I mean, an investor who invests in the market or in the stock expects around 10 to 12% yearly. I don't know if you agree with me, Enrique. And Mexico right now is still paying that kind of rates. I mean, we do some strategies when we get a larger duration and we get into a mutual fund, so we make the difference or the spread of the rate that is going down. So in this environment, when the rates are going down, there's still a good chance to make a higher rate than their preference rate. So we, at this moment, is really not much to do with a portfolio. I mean, not much that you don't need to get creative or that creative. But as you also mentioned, Mexicans get exposure to US dollars and to euros, mostly through stocks or through other funds or ETFs. They don't hold the currency directly because it doesn't make much sense. We need to make a return on the currency as well. So yes, wealthy Mexicans and Mexican investors also hold foreign currencies, but they're right now liking the peso a lot. The question since last week is, man, I think I should sell my dollars. What do you think? I've been hearing about this. And they're really connected, and Mexico is really connected of what's going on in the States, And people and smart people in Mexico are seeing that the states is devaluating their currency at some point. And that's kind of the sense they have. This is what people outside say. I'm not an analyst, but that's what you hear outside. They're afraid that U.S. is going to continue to devaluate their currency because they want to compete in trade, which I think could be something, and I think Enrique will talk about that. But yes, right now 8.5 is the reference rate. Whatever we make above that, it's very good for us, and we have making very good job with that.
Yes, and perhaps one needs to think about the alternative for an investor that has its money in dollars, has access to risk-free rates of some sort. You can buy short-term bonds, an ETF that has a very, very low risk. The rate in the United States, even if we assume that it's not going to be cut forever, let's say, that's obviously not the case, but let's suppose that it's not going to be cut at any time soon. The rate is at 4.5%. So if instead of investing your US dollars in 4.5% bonds, you change them to pesos, and then you invest them in the rate that we have in Mexico, that is about 8%, that means that you have a 4% depreciation margin of the currency in Mexico, and more or less be at the same level. And that's the worst case scenario for an investor, because I think that the more plausible outcome is that once the full effect of tariffs affect the U.S. economy, that it will affect it, of course, because it's going to be reducing imports. There's some competitiveness that is going to be lost in the short term in the American economy. The U.S., the Federal Reserve, at some point will have to start cutting rates, and that 4.5% doesn't seem too likely to remain for a long time. It could go down to, 3.5%, 3%, 2%. And on the other hand, here in Mexico, the cuts are already priced in. You don't really expect the central bank to be cutting much more than that. So the cushion that you have in case of an error in terms of currency markets it's really biased in favor of changing money to Mexican pesos now rather than later. Now, of course, Mexico is a country that you don't really need to bring the money and change them into Mexican pesos right away. You can bring dollars and keep them in dollars for a while before you do the exchange of currency. So you can also keep the money in dollars in Mexico directly or through the investments, so through funds or some other ideas. But in both cases, I think that it's more likely that we are going to be seeing foreigners, companies, and individual investors changing that into Mexican pesos, using the very last opportunity that people have in the country to lock in rates at the highest possible level for the longest possible period of time, and then using that currency, those Mexican pesos, whenever they find it that is going to be the most useful.
I think it's worth to make a small parenthesis here. And as we know, markets move with expectations, right? That's what moves the markets, what moves currency, what moves the assets all through the world. And the expectations that people and countries are having about Mexico are very positive. Yeah, normally Mexicans are very negative of what's going on in Mexico and what's next to happen. But this and the strength of the peso is showing us the confidence that the whole world has in Mexico, and also the position that Mexico is putting out. Americans normally know Mexico because we're neighbors. Canadians, that's good for us. But Asians starting to know Mexico. Europeans are starting to know Mexico. Even Middle East is starting to invest in Mexico. So it's something is a little bit different. We are there's a hype about Mexico. Mexico is getting known more and more every time. And that comes up with the currency, with expectations, and with the confidence.
So let me see what I'm hearing now. So you've got the two experts on the screen, however I can show them or point them out. What I'm hearing is, if you had to buy a house in Mexico, if you needed pesos in the next 6 months or a year, and you had the choice to purchase them now or to wait around, that you would exchange now and invest that money in Mexico and not wait for a better interest rate. Of course, so in terms of when I say better, I'm talking from the standpoint of someone from the US, maybe Canada too, is that right now it was maybe just a few weeks ago when it was 20 and a half or something like that. It's been sliding down. It's just more like 19 and a quarter or something like that today. So that means I'm getting less pesos for every dollar that I spend. You are thinking that is going to continue potentially to slide because so many people are investing in Mexico.
That's
Did
a
I get it right?
discussion. That's a discussion Enrique and I have been having for the past 3 years. Nobody has a crystal ball, Brighton. It's very hard to predict this. But the way we'll play it, and I'll give you the word in 1 minute, Enrique. It's yes, if you're planning to do that, I will bring the dollars into Mexico. We might see a spike, in the next week or something. Geopolitical. There's going to be some. Of course, Trump is going to tweet something. Something might happen that we might get a chance. But I will act more fast than slow. I mean, now I do receive calls from investment bankers in the U.S. managing money over here, and they're also changing dollars into pesos at this rate. So, just my comment. Go ahead, Enrique. Sorry.
No. It's exactly the same thing as you said. It's very difficult to forecast financial variables. This is always a game of probabilities. We analysts try to calculate as best as we possibly can probabilities. The one thing that is more likely to happen is that rates are going to go down in Mexico. That's the one thing that we have the most certainty. The central bank has been signaling as clear as they possibly can. Rates are going down. We are expecting rates to go down, and they are going to be lowering for at least the foreseeable future. That's one thing for sure. Whenever it comes to the exchange rate, it's always difficult. It's one of the most liquid assets anywhere in the world. Well, not one of those liquid assets, one of the most liquid currencies anywhere in the world. And I'm talking not only among emerging economies. I'm talking about all economies, whether they're developed or developing economies. The Mexican peso is very, very liquid. So it also makes it for an asset that whenever there are bad news, like Bernardo is saying, whenever Trump tweets something bad or something like that happens, it affects the Mexican peso, and those prices tend to be negative in terms of a depreciation rather than an appreciation. But if you think about the different things that could happen in the future, I guess the best case scenario, I mean, we do it in a more formal way, and we analyze it with data and statistics, but it's more likely that right now we're in an environment where things are perceived to be at the worst possible time in terms of negotiation with the US, in terms of investment, in terms of growth, and surprises that could come seem a little bit more biased to the positive side. Now, that positive side could mean, of course, an appreciation of the currency. Most likely, I think it means that the currency is going to be stable. And the different forces where you can try to calculate demand for Mexican pesos or demand for other currencies from Mexican investors that are already holding those pesos, I think more or less those forces are suggesting that the short-term expectation for the currency is one where we should be thinking that the risks are more or less balanced and that the exchange rate is going to be more or less stable. And you also need to think that Mexico is not only about investors paying their money to invest in rates. Mexico, as I was saying at the beginning of this talk, is a very large, very diversified economy, and there's demand for Mexican pesos among many different sectors. For example, tourism. There's a lot of Mexicans that are traveling to around anywhere around the world, but there's also a lot of foreigners coming into Mexico and spending their money. The difference in favor of Mexico, I mean, Mexicans, foreigners spending in Mexico currencies rather than Mexicans spending outside, it's a positive surplus for the Mexican economy at a rate of about $25 to $30 billion per year. That's the net influx of foreign currency into Mexico just because of tourism. There's also a lot of workers, Mexican workers that live along the border, legally go to the US every day to work. They get paid in US dollars, but then they go back to Tijuana or to Juarez or to wherever city they live. It's very difficult to measure the exact money that is returning to Mexico, but we think that it's more or less at a rate of about $15 billion per year. There's also Americans that live along their southern border, maybe in San Diego, maybe in, I don't know, in Laredo, in Texas, that they go to Mexico, and in Mexico they spend their money going to the doctor, filling up their tank, or going to the supermarket, and that's more or less another $15 billion a year net for Mexico. There's exports. I mean, there's so many things in Mexico that are happening, and in general, the factor is that there's more demand for pesos from abroad than Mexicans holding pesos demanding outside, at a rate of about $100 billion per year net in favor of Mexico. So all those forces more or less seem to be balanced in terms of an expectation of a stable Mexican peso, but with a very high rate that might not even be compatible with this environment. I think that in general it's a good opportunity to change some money into pesos and using that interest rate.
Okay. Good. Yeah, there will be a video coming out soon. I'm predicting a lot of videos coming out soon. Specifically one video about why we might need some pesos in Mexico. But let's pop up a question here. We're going to Mexico this fall, and the prices of accommodations are going up. Are the costs of housing going up in recent months? So this might be a little bit about that exchange rate, that the accommodations are probably priced in pesos, and so as the exchange rate goes more in Mexico's favor, that it's been 5% or something more costly for people in dollars to pay. Any other thoughts on that? Are prices going up? Is there inflation? How about inflation in Mexico, maybe?
Yeah, well, inflation in Mexico is not a big problem. Actually, inflation at the worst point in the years post-pandemic, our inflation rate was even lower than the one in the US. It doesn't happen most of the times, but this time around it happened. And inflation right now is a little bit less, a little bit below 4%, but we are expecting that to be around 4 to 4.5% for the next month. So inflation is stable in Mexico. Now, inflation, the way it's measured in every country around the world, it depends on someone, in this case, the statistical agency in Mexico, choosing a very specific basket of goods, declaring that the basket that is going to be used to monitor prices, and with that declaring inflation. So it could be a basket that is not really representing the consumption behavior that a foreigner coming into Mexico, whether it's to live or because of tourism, might face when they come to Mexico. In the very particular case of real estate, and real estate of a good level, whether it's a nice apartment, a nice house, or you just come here and rent an Airbnb or a hotel, those prices are going up in Mexico, and they're going up rather high. There's many reasons for that. One of them is that, for example, prices of housing in, let's say, California are so high that now we're seeing more or less the opposite trend that we saw in previous decades. Now it's about Americans moving to Tijuana, renting a house in Tijuana, and every day going to San Isidro or San Diego or some place in California to work, and then coming back to live in Baja California and in the city of Tijuana, for example. That has created not really a bubble, but at least an increase, a very important increase in real estate prices in Tijuana. We saw, for example, in the very first year post-pandemic, there were some studies that showed that housing as a whole in Tijuana increased by 25% in a single year. But those houses are at the higher level where Americans were renting. I saw some studies that showed that only the first year those prices went 50, 60% upwards. Now, also because of the change of work behavior around the world, now people don't really need to go to the office anymore, or not so much anymore. A lot of digital nomads are trying to find better places to work. You can live in the US, you can live in Canada, but there could be some people that because of weather or because of prices or simply because whatever reason you might want to have, they're finding places in Mexico to be more appropriate for living. I mean, I'll let in a moment, maybe Bernardo can say about Baja California Sur, Los Cabos, where there's a very large amount of digital nomads that are moving. But at least here in Mexico City, where I'm located now, you should go to most of the neighborhoods in the central parts of the city. It's that difficult to hear Spanish being spoken. They're speaking a lot of English. I mean, I heard a very bad joke, someone saying that they need to practice their Spanish better, so we're moving to LA to be able to do that rather than Mexico City. But those prices are going up in a lot of places in Mexico. And that's probably another reason to hurry up and changing your money to pesos and buying real estate here in Mexico, because prices are definitely going up.
Yeah, about what you say in Mexico City, Enrique, I just saw a study a few months ago or weeks ago. I can share afterwards. They were saying there were more expats moving to Mexico City than Baja California Sur and some other place together. I mean, last time I was in Mexico City, I went to Polanco, La Condesa. Man, there were so many expats living there. I talked to a few of them. I like to talk to people. They feel very welcome. They feel very happy. I mean, gentrification is something Mexico City needs to worry about, of course, and people are worried over there. Prices are going up. You've realized that. But it's getting more and more crowded. You know, I mean, you also see in Baja Sur, you see all these vans with the satellite internet. They can work wherever they like. It's something that's is happening really fast, you know?
Yeah, and I think there is a sentiment of that, but I think it's limited, and it's more limited. I mean, it's more of a problem in places like Mexico City, where there's so many young expats coming, and taking up essentially the apartments and whatnot that people were living in, versus an area like Cabo, or La Paz, the way I think of it is, they're building new housing for expats specifically, so they're not competing for the exact same resources. So, but I know that question did come up. So let's see here. So water shortages in Mexico and Mexico City. I think there's water shortages across Mexico. I know that's not specifically about economy, and we only have a few more minutes left, but there's a question here. What about the price of purchasing a car in Mexico? And this is actually something also I'm going to need to purchase some. Actually, I guess they're made in Mexico. The mini splits are made in Mexico, and so the price is going up a little bit, I think, in the United States. But other things with Mexico, is Mexico also hopping into this tariff war with other countries, or is it pretty much just the United States versus every other country, or is Mexico saying, yeah, well, we're going to raise the tariffs also with China or other places?
No, I mean, so far, Mexico is a country that is built, or modern Mexico at least, is a country that is built on the premise that free trade works. And that's one of the reasons that Mexico has designed the entire economy for the last 40, 50 years to work primarily with the US, even if that comes at the expense of not being able to diversify its production with other countries. So about 90% of Mexican exports go to the US, and that is something that is not going to be changing in the future. Now, having said that, last year something happened for the very first time in the history of our country, and that is that Mexico imported more from Asia than from the US. We never saw that coming. The US didn't see that coming. Mexico is importing all kinds of production inputs, whether it's textiles or plastics or chemicals and all kinds of things, are imported not only from China, from Japan, from Korea, from Vietnam, from many different places. And some of those things are used for producing in Mexico and then sending in Mexican product to the US. But also some of those things are just being imported into Mexico and then just being placed in boxes and putting a seal and then being sent to the US. So it's very difficult to know exactly what the end outcome of this negotiation is going to be. But I think it's going to be safe to assume that in some way or another, Mexico is expected to start importing less from Asia and either producing those things ourselves or importing them from the US and Canada. Now, it's very difficult to compete with China. China is a very efficient country, and producing everything ourselves, or even worse, importing things from, I don't know, let's say from California or an expensive place in the US, it doesn't seem to be the thing that is going to be the more competitive for North America in the short run. But it's something that, if you think about a plan, maybe a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, I think that we have to reduce our dependency on Chinese imports, on Asian imports in general. And Mexico might be required as part of this negotiation to be negotiating with Asia with higher tariffs. One of the most important tariffs, and I saw a question here popping up about automobiles in Mexico, we have the same problem that everywhere in the US. Cars are really, really, really expensive. But one thing that is different in Mexico compared to the US is that we are capable of buying very cheap Chinese cars that are not produced in Mexico at all. They're produced in China. They're being sent into Mexico by boat. And once they get in Mexico, you go to your local retailer, and then you can buy it at a very, very cheap price. They tend to cost maybe half or 40% of a comparable car with a North American brand cost in the US. I don't think that's going to remain for a long time. I think, as I'm mentioning, I think that part of the negotiation is going to be that Mexico will have to impose tariffs to Chinese products the same way that the US is setting them. But that has to come as part of the negotiation. I mean, that means that Mexico is going to be in a better place, producing in more favorable conditions with the US, perhaps even with a compromise of US investment coming into Mexico. I think it's going to be a fair deal for everyone but the Chinese. But the US has to do one thing. They can choose to produce with China, they can choose to produce with Mexico, or they can have inflation. But you have to choose which of the three you want to have. And I don't think that the US government wants to produce with China. I definitely don't think that the US wants to have inflation. So the only other possibility is to produce with Mexico. And some of the products that I see being asked here in the questions about prices in Mexico, I mean, we should be expecting some of those prices to also go down. North American products, those prices to go down at the expense of Chinese or Asian products in general to go up here in the country.
Okay. Well, I have got to wrap up here. As we got a couple of questions coming in, but I've got to wrap up, and I do want to give maybe Bernardo a chance to mention just a couple of things about Actinver because this is Actinver is the reason that we have you guys here today, and they are my bank, my investment bank. I do have Banorte is kind of my retail bank that I use on a day-to-day basis, but I have more money in Actinver sitting there and earning me pesos. So can you just tell us a little bit about how someone can get involved with Actinver? I'm going to put
yeah, Brighton. I mean, you're going to put your link over there where people can ask about it, and we're going to answer really fast. Whatever questions they have, leave us your contact information, and we'll get back to you. Normally, people have a huge barrier in banking in other country. It is like an offshore investment, or it's a big decision to make. At the end, if you're in Mexico, you're going to need a debit account. You're also going to need a transactional account. And Actinver is a bank where, although our base is an investment bank, we also have transactional service. So we provide transactional service to our investors through our app, which is also in English, and through our webpage, so people can do their movements, they can do their payments. You also will have a personal advisor who is taking care of you, and your advisor is not only about your account, it's also about how to move in Mexico, how to get connected in Mexico. We're also your friends. We can get you through. We can help you analyze situations, informations, real estate. All the information you provide, we can help you out to analyze it, okay? So we're kind of like the touch point on friends. We connect people with lawyers also. We help you out with your life down here. So it's very easy, guys. You only need your tourist visa, and you need an address. The address can be in the States, doesn't need to be down here in Mexico or your origin country. It might take us a few more days to take it up, but it's very easy to open an account in Mexico and start earning this interest that we were talking about. So for more information, Brighton will be sharing a link where you can ask for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bernardo. Thank you so much, Enrique. This was a very education heavy. We didn't have that many questions. We do have some new questions coming in and a lot of thank yous coming in, but I do want to respect everyone's time here and get everyone on with the rest of their evening. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this. Let me know if you want to have more discussions like this. Let me know if you just want to have more happy hours or we just chat. So you can leave those in the chat, or there will be comments down below if you are getting on after when this is the recorded version. And that recorded version should be available pretty much as soon as we hit stop. You should start seeing the recorded version. So any final thoughts?
Well,
Bernardo?
maybe I can say something, and then I think there's always a lot of mentions about Mexico, and normally media focus on the negative things, but Mexico is a very, very attractive place nowadays, and you can see how much optimism there is in the country. There's a lot of different hotspots where digital nomads are coming, where there's a lot of expats moving into Mexico, and it's not only touristic places. Larger cities are also receiving a lot of expats, and it's a very booming community. So please feel free to ask us questions here at Actinver. If you have any questions about what to do with your money, with your financial services in general, we'll be very happy to help you along this incredible path that we are seeing Mexico to be having.
And you're hearing that advice from someone who also had been in Cambridge, had been in other places like Enrique. He's been all over the world, been a teacher. Some other places we can talk about that in other talk, but he chooses to be here. I choose to be here. Brighton chooses to be here. So we're here to help you out, guys. Have a nice one.
I choose to be there on a regular basis, but right now I wish I was there. Let me know if I should have a Mexico, like the outline of the country of Mexico on there. It seems like it would make more sense with that. So just let me know if I should redesign the t-shirt. Otherwise, there'll be links to purchase this. So thank you all very much. Thanks for being here. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.